CEO Live Talks.
I am Dr. Swannie Jett, and I have a passion for public health for over 30 years. Now, I'm in a position to affect change, and these are the critical conversations about health in our community with the people who can help me make those changes. Good afternoon. Welcome to CEO Live Talks. I'm your host, Dr. Swannie Jett. Today, I want to show Miss Flanery. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank
Your
you.
fist bump?
Yes.
So, first of all, I want to say thank you for coming to the show. I've waited for a long time to have you here. Simple format, I always start off at the beginning. Tell me, where did you grow up at?
Where did I grow up at? Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. I grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky.
Okay.
I lived a little bit in Moorhead and in Lexington, but mostly I lived in Frankfort, Kentucky.
Okay. So, Frankfort, and for our listeners that don't know, Moorhead are totally two different places.
They sure are.
Right?
Yeah.
So, explain the differences between the two.
So I love both of them. That's one thing I can say is I've absolutely lived everywhere I've lived in Kentucky. So that's lucky, I guess. But Frankfort is our state capital.
Right.
And so for people who don't know, it's really one of the smallest towns in the United States that is also a state capital.
That is correct.
And the reason it was selected to be the state capital is because it was midway between Lexington and Louisville that were fighting over that. So with state government, you really get a lot of a statewide view,
Right.
which is a wonderful thing. I really enjoyed that part of it.
Right.
We moved to Moorhead when I was about 4 years old because my mother was married to a man who got a job as a professor of political science at Moorhead State University.
Okay.
So when we were there, we first lived in the dorms, right basically on campus. And I loved that because it was all the families of the professors, and they came from Hawaii and Africa and Pennsylvania and Frankfort.
Right.
And so that was wonderful. And he actually was from Louisville, but my mom and my dad are from Frankfort. And so that was a great way to grow up. And I went through from kindergarten all the way through third grade, and then we moved back to Frankfort. And what I loved about that is I went to the school that was the education school, and so we had just a lot of attention because anybody who wanted to be a teacher and was in the teaching program at MSU would use us as, it's like a lab. It's a lab school, right?
Yeah.
It was great. And when I moved back to Frankfort, which was fine educationally, I realized the things I was learning in fourth grade, especially along the side of math, were things that we did right in first grade at the model school.
So the interesting thing, and that had to be an adjustment going from Moorhead back to Frankfort.
Yes.
Because it's more of a prestigious role for your father at the time. So, before we get into that, back up, because obviously you have siblings.
Well, that's an interesting question.
Okay.
So in some ways, you could say I was an only child. In some ways, I have a fairly large family.
Right.
So I have today 2 half-sisters and a half-brother, and then I have 2 step-brothers that were actually adopted by my dad, but he's been divorced from their mother for a long time. And along the way, I had other step-siblings that I don't have now.
Okay. All right. So your mama got remarried.
Yes.
And your biological dad, was he still around? Because sometimes in family dichotomies, that there's a shift.
Yeah, right. Well, they got divorced before I was 2.
Okay.
And so for my entire knowing world, they've had 2 different households. There's no animosity there. And for a period of time, this didn't last forever, but for a period of time, they relied on each other a little bit. And I remember one time my dad, with my stepmother, went to Florida, and my mom watched the 3 boys.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So that was a one-time thing. It wasn't a bad thing, but they didn't meet her after that.
Right.
So there's, every time my husband and I have hosted a holiday, I have my mom there. I have my dad there. Neither one of them are married right now.
Okay.
So there's no animosity there, but they do live completely different households.
Okay. So, did you find that strange? Because knowing as
Yeah.
we are adults and we have grown up,
Right.
we see what is happening in society.
Sure.
So that's an anomaly to me.
I don't really think I thought of it as strange. I do remember in fourth grade, I remember we went to camp. So I think it was like 4-H camp. And I
Right.
remember everybody was given a piece of paper to write their family tree. And at some point I was like, can I have some more paper? Right? Because it just kept going horizontal.
Right.
But everybody I considered to be my family.
Mm-hmm.
So, but some of them are not in my family now. Like I don't see them anymore. And they were people that I spent holidays with.
Okay.
So that is, when you look back on it, obviously that's unusual. But
Right.
at the time I didn't really think so.
Right. So are you still close with
Both.
some of your brothers?
They both had
sisters?
catastrophic health issues. My mom had a massive stroke on Labor Day of 2020.
Okay.
And if you'll recall, that's still when we had COVID going on. And so she ended up being airlifted from Frankfurt. We just happened to find her because it was a holiday. She lives alone. It could easily have gone the other way.
Wow.
She ended up being airlifted to UK on Labor Day, which a lot of times, you have a thinning hospital staff. And my sister was able to piece together when she would have had the stroke based on something she had done the night before with a mutual friend.
Right.
And because of that, they were able to give her some medicine that they can't do after a period of time.
Right.
And even with that, she spent almost a year either in Fraser rehab after UK or living in my house in the dining room. And she lives alone now in Frankfurt. So she did everything you could possibly do to rehab, from not being able to speak at all, having the entire half of her body not be able to move it, she can drive now.
Okay.
So it's been kind of an amazing thing. And then almost the same time as the Labor Day, end of August, beginning of September of 2022, my dad immediately went from working in real estate in Lexington. He's a green coat at Keeneland, so he's one of those men, and he has been for 10 years. He's got his 10-year pin that sits outside the paddock where the tunnel is and helps people figure out where to go. He's so social, right? Real estate and that. Immediately had to go in the hospital, and he was like, but I have a dog at home. I have to take Buddy out. He lives alone. And it was like, no, and he's never been back to his house since then. He went into hospice for several months. Now he is in a personal care home in Louisville, so I can be closer to him.
Right.
And he can't drive, but he's not in hospice anymore, and he just needs a little bit of help. And he's very conversational. It's a lot of fun to take him out on drives around Louisville. He wants to know all about all the neighborhoods, because he's, that's what he did in Lexington. So it's been kind of fun.
But it's a blessing to still have them around.
I know.
But that put an enormous amount of strain on you and the family.
Yes.
So how did y'all deal with that, and still dealing with your father now?
Right. So this is where I have to give a shout out to my husband, Kevin. Kevin actually had planned to retire and did retire in January of 2021. So my mom was living with us. And there was COVID, and we had a caregiver in the house for about 10 hours a day. And he really stepped up. When it looked like she was going to be okay and she was going to be able to live on her own again, we purchased a small house in Frankfurt because that's where she wanted to live, not where we live. Before, she had lived in her bedroom and her bath and everything were up 16 stairs.
Oh, wow.
Right. And she had lived there for 25 to 30 years. So this was a big change. But got her a little kind of a garden home. And we bought it from a woman who had it since it was new. I think it was 1993. And nothing had really been updated. And so he went in and put in hardwood floors so she wouldn't trip on the carpet, the new bathroom, countertops, all the appliances. And he'd never done anything like that before.
Oh, wow.
We're the professional class. We are not the handy class or the people who are professionals in that realm at all.
Wow.
So he really stepped up for that. And then with my dad, he has been the primary person because he's retired to take him to all of his medical appointments, to make sure he has the clothes that he needs. And so that I'm free really just to kind of be his entertainment.
Right. That's
It's
great.
really nice.
Hello, my name is Sierra Clark, and I'm the Chronic Disease Manager at Park Duval Community Health Center. Ever since I started at Park Duval over 9 years ago, I have been committed to helping patients live healthier lifestyles. I am currently serving patients in the Chronic Care Management Program, or CCM program. My team and I help patients manage their chronic conditions such as obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. In this CCM program, you will receive several benefits to help you manage your health. We offer monthly telephone calls to check in with your progress and to assist you with any concerns, assistance with scheduling your healthcare appointments, and assistance with filling your prescriptions in a timely and convenient manner. We also offer many resources to help you with the barriers you may face with eating healthy, being physically active, or monitoring your conditions at home. For more information, visit us online at pdchc.org or visit one of our health centers.
So, your father being in real estate, and what did your mom do?
So my mom was basically the mayor of Frankfort.
Okay.
So she worked for the Legislative Research Commission for 40 some years until literally she just turned 80 this year. So literally until she had her stroke, she was still working at least during sessions.
Okay.
But she at one time was the top executive secretary for the head of the Senate, right? The Senate president. She did that for a number of years. She was in constituent services. Earlier in her career, she had worked a little bit in the executive branch for economic development and energy and environment kind of things.
Okay.
She'd worked for community action agencies, and I remember that a lot because I was around the ages of 10 to 12 when she did that, and that was fun because we got to travel all over the state.
Right.
Because community action agencies are everywhere.
Right.
And that's where I really got to understand like the things and the programs that are important for seniors, for people who are out more in the rural, because a lot of Louisvillians think of Frankfort is rural. We didn't think of ourselves as rural. You know, we were the capital.
Right.
So I'm talking about really rural Kentucky and really having that statewide view. I think that had a big impact on me, Head Start. And she always wanted to quit. And I thought she was going to do it around the time I was 12 or 13. We had a roommate who also worked for the Senate. And she was a really good photographer. My mom was a journalism major. She's a really good writer. And they were going to take me out of school for a year and drive all over the country and take stories of seniors and, you know, just families all over. We didn't do it for a variety of reasons. But I would have loved to have done that.
So your mom did a lot of advocacy work.
Yeah.
And dive a little bit deeper into what did that teach you? Because she actually was helping the most vulnerable part of the population.
Absolutely. She always had her attention on that. Any room she was in, she was the person who was really talking to the person who was the most vulnerable, who might be the most socially awkward, you know, somebody that she was very, very personable.
Right.
And that's why I call her the mayor of Frankfort, because to this day, anywhere I go, if I take her out to eat or something like that, you know, 5 people will come up and like, oh my gosh, you know, how are you doing? And we have different last names. And my sister has a third different last name.
Oh, wow.
And so when people, I will always say this, when people realized who my mother was, my stock always went up in people's eyes.
That's good.
Which is a really nice thing.
Good.
And my dad lived in Lexington, so a lot of people didn't know him, even though he grew up in Frankfort. He lived in Lexington most of his life. But she always said things to me like, you know, we're no better than anybody else, and we're not worse than anybody else.
Right.
And you really need to be nice to everyone in your world. First of all, because it's a thing to do, but you also don't know where they'll end up in life.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that changeability, that always looking forward, always looking to improve yourself, always caring about other people. I definitely got a lot of lessons from her being that way, and she's still that way.
Yeah, I would assume, because most time people, you know, they get a sense of power and authority. They always think they're going to remain there.
I know.
Right.
So my husband got a position like that in his early 30s, and he laughs. I don't remember telling him. But he got the job, and about 2 weeks in, you know, it's just a heady experience. And I said, you've never been better looking, smarter, funnier than you are right now, and you won't be later. You know,
right.
Because I do think that's one thing. If you do grow up in the center of government, which Frankfort, of course, is for our state, it changes all the time.
It's changed
right?
all the
And so
time.
you know that what you're doing when you're in a position like that is you are being honored to be the steward of something that belongs to the people.
Right.
And Kevin said he didn't really know what I meant until he left that job, and he was like, Lori was so right on this, because he grew up in Louisville, not around the center of power.
Well, and the thing is if you treat people bad when you have that power or have that authority,
Correct.
that person might end up over you or in their sense of power and take advantage of that.
Exactly. And why wouldn't they?
Right. Right.
You know,
right. Now
turn
they
around
on
is fair
top,
play.
and they remember that.
Yes, of course. And why would you do it anyway?
Right.
I mean, you know, why wouldn't you want to lift other people up? It just makes everything better when, you know, just because you get something doesn't mean I'm hurt.
Right. Right. So your sense of growing up in an environment where your family was helping people, so where did you decide to go for school and why?
So I was an English nerd, and I did end up majoring in English at the University of Kentucky.
Okay.
Again, I was wanderlust, so I always wanted to go somewhere else.
Right.
It did not make sense for me from a financial standpoint.
Okay.
So I went to the University of Kentucky. I ended up loving it. It was great. I liked it so much that I ended up going to law school there. And I've had people ask me before, did you always want to be a lawyer? No. And even when I started law school at UK in 1987, so that's when I graduated from getting my BA in English to go into law school, so just moved to another side of campus, right? 7 years at UK.
Right.
I will say I was pretty unknowledgeable about any legal types of things, even though my mother was an executive secretary for government, right? So I kind of understood the government piece, but not really the legal piece. I didn't know what a plaintiff was, right? I had to look that up. So, but I had done really well on the LSAT, so I got a scholarship for the first year. And my dad, of course, was like, "You're going to be a deal killer?" Oh my gosh, you know, because he's in real estate. Mm-hmm. He's very proud now. But the reason that I even thought about going to law school is twofold. One, I got a job working for the state as a social worker, making about $12,000 a year, and I realized I wasn't going to be able to get a car and apartment.
Right.
And the other thing is, one of my younger half sisters has always wanted to be a lawyer. I mean, always. She's the one whose father was the political science professor at MSU. And she's younger than me, right? 4.5 years.
Couldn't let her beat you.
Huh?
You couldn't let her beat you.
No. Actually, I'm not competitive with her, but I feel sorry for her because she always wanted to do it, and I'm her older sister. So I followed in her footsteps, but nobody knows that. They probably think she followed in mine.
Oh, okay. That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. So I went to UK Law School, did great. Went to Wyatt Tarrant Combs afterwards in Lexington. Loved that because that was the biggest law firm in Kentucky at the time.
Okay.
So I realized there, again, you're holding something, right, which is the power of the big law firm. People would take my calls, even though I was, wet behind the ears.
Right.
I was able to be a part of really interesting conversations. We had a couple of governors in our firm, so I got to learn from them what their lives had been like as they entered back into private practice. And just some really, really interesting people. And because that was so early in my career, unless you really knew what you wanted to do as a lawyer, they let you bounce around. And so I got to do employment law and labor law and reverse triangular bank mergers and, just all kinds of stuff. It was really interesting.
You got a lot to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So where did you land?
Well, I'm not sure I've landed yet.
You landed somewhere in law, or you decided
so after I left Wyatt Tarrant Combs, I went to the Public Service Commission. And so I laughed about that.
That's
a state government, right?
Right.
And so I laughed about that because we were living in Louisville at the time. We were living in Lexington when I worked at Wyatt. We moved to Louisville, and when we moved to Louisville, I switched to work for the state. And there's a number of us around my age in Frankfurt who ended up working in state government, and we all laugh because when you grow up in state government, as much as you revere the principles behind it, it's like a company town.
Right.
You don't want to work there. But yet I spent the majority of my career traveling 100 miles a day, right, to do this job. But I worked to the Public Service Commission as an attorney. I ended up being selected to be our legislative liaison and our ethics officer. And so that opened, I love the PSC. I love all of that utility regulation. It's one of the smallest agencies in state government, but it's just almost every single person that works there is some kind of engineering, tariff, economics, legal professional, and they serve this commission. And a lot of people think, well, that's a small agency, it doesn't have a big budget, but the impact, of regulating utilities is amazing.
It's great.
And I saw people come in who lived in trailers, who couldn't afford their utility bills, right? And that made a huge impression on me. It's one thing to be worried about, what the normal person is going to pay. It's a whole other thing to be thinking about you're going to lose your housing because you can't afford your utilities, right? So anyway, because I was the legislative liaison and because I was the ethics officer for a brand new ethics bill that had just passed in 1992, I believe, I was asked to appear before the commission to educate them on this new ethics law. And when I came in, the brand new executive director for the new ethics commission was sitting there. And I was a little bit horrified because I thought, she's an expert, and here I'm just trying to educate my bosses about a brand new bill. But anyway, she ended up hiring me as the first general counsel for the Executive Branch Ethics Commission. So that's when I left the PSC. And I loved that because it was new. So you're creating all the regulations, all the educational materials. You had to decide, you had to look at the law and decide you're supposed to only apply to people who are making discretionary decisions within government. Where is that line? And people still fight about that today. Where is that line? Should that person be a merit employee that's protected by the merit system? Or is that person somebody that really could be hired or fired at will for whatever administration comes in? So that was interesting.
We are here in the community. We partner with our community health workers to run vaccination clinics throughout the city of Louisville, specifically downtown and the West End. The importance of events like these is that a lot of people have transportation issues, so we are able to come out into the community and get people the vaccinations that they need.
So it's really important to have these type of events in the community because, as we know, when COVID and flu season comes around, our underserved communities are hit the hardest. So if we can bring any vaccines or anything that they need, glucose testing, it's important to meet people where they're at.
At Park Duval, we care about the community. We do events like this monthly because we are the community and we love to give back to the community.
Be sure to visit our website for more of our upcoming community outreach events.
For more information, visit us online at pdchc.org.
You was a social worker, and when you first got out of college, you made $12,000 a year. And what year was that? So kids
That would
can
have
have a
been
perspective.
in 1987.
Because, I was complaining because when I got out, I think my first job was a few years after you, was $31,000.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, it's a big difference.
and we're only talking about us 5 years, and I didn't think $31,000 was enough.
Right.
So
Yeah. And so when I would say, just to compare, so flash forward a little bit, when I left White and Tarrant Combs, which would have been like in 92, and went to the state. So I was at the largest law firm that made the highest salary, and I went to become an attorney, not the general counsel, right? But an attorney at the Public Service Commission. I was making around $31,000.
Okay.
And that was a probably 40% haircut from the job that I had at Wyatt. So I thought it would be temporary. I really did. But a lot of times you think that, and then you look back 20-some years later. So when I was at the Cabinet for Economic Development, that was really exciting because, again, I think that is the smallest cabinet, right, in all of state government. But it has the biggest reach. And, we would get a little bit arrogant. We'd be like, well, everything education is doing is really for economic development. Everything transportation is doing is really for us, you know. In a good way, right? To show the best and to invest in people the best and make us the best we could possibly be. You wanted to attract as much investment as you could for jobs. You wanted to grow jobs that are already here, making people less likely to leave. Very important for Kentucky. Very important for Kentucky.
It's very important.
But about 2 years into my general counsel role there, I was asked to have my first non-legal job.
Okay.
And that was still at the cabinet, but it was as commissioner of the Department of Financial Incentives. So for there, I was over every incentive that the state at the time had to offer for economic development. So we had several boards. My staff would staff those boards. So
what made you accept that? Because the other role you had greater impact.
Yeah. So did the commissioner job.
Okay.
It had great impact. It really did. We had to work with,
Well, it gave you more visibility, of course.
I would say so. I think general counsel is more internal role, usually. I do think that's right.
Right.
But the thing about being a lawyer, because that wasn't my last general counsel job.
Right.
The thing about being a lawyer is you can always go back to it. I can go back to it today.
Right.
Right. I could do that till the end of my life as a
Right.
counsel. So
That's-
that is a wonderful thing, have that
That is.
profession. So anyway, I did that for a few years, and then because I was the proxy, right? So the person that would show up on behalf of the cabinet secretary
Right.
at different board meetings, I got to be the proxy for Kentucky Housing Corporation. And Kentucky Housing Corporation, different than economic development, because economic development, again, is not run solely
Right.
by the governor, it's
Right.
by a partnership. But Kentucky Housing Corporation is actually what's known as a quasi-entity,
Okay.
which really is you've got the public, private,
Mhm.
government, all three elements of that in that organization. It was a dotted line report to the Finance Administration Cabinet, but it didn't have to follow procurement, did not have to follow personnel.
Okay.
So it really is a quasi-entity.
So would it be a quasi, because you've been in, sort of these roles dealing with ethics, and people always try to escape around ethics,
Right.
right? What issues did you face?
I really didn't have a lot of issues. I would say the most questions that I had were people who were wanting to leave state government.
Okay.
Because when you leave, there was a 1-year prohibition and a
Right.
2-year prohibition.
Right.
And trying to delineate which one applied to each person depending, because they don't all, one of them applied to everybody, and then
Right.
the other one applied only to people who were in discretionary positions.
Okay.
And so I would say people were just really making sure they were not messing up as they were leaving state
Right.
government.
Right. So they didn't want that conflict of interest or
What
a non-compete.
And they didn't want
or-
their new employer to be
Right.
hooked up in some kind of state ethics charge,
Right.
right?
Right.
So anyway, I went to Kentucky Housing Corporation as general counsel. I was there for 8 years. I ended up being the deputy CEO. Loved it. Wanted to be the CEO. So when Steve Bashir came in, that was going to be my ask. I was going to
Okay.
ask him, because I call him OG Bashir now,
But
right?
everybody's been coming to you anyway,
Yeah.
offering you positions,
It was-
so you ain't got to ask for nothing.
It was wonderful,
'Cause-
but I wasn't sure he'd think of me because he didn't really
Right.
know me.
Right.
So that was going to be my ask. But Jonathan Miller came in as the Secretary of Finance, and he called me. He had asked me to be the assistant treasurer when he was state treasurer,
Okay.
but I stayed at KC because of the mission, not because of Jonathan. But when he became the finance secretary, he circled back
Right.
and he said, "Will you come be my deputy secretary?" And I said, "Oh no, I want you to help me. I want to be the head of Kentucky Housing Corporation."
Right.
And he said, "I tell you what, if you will help me get through this first budget season and help me get acclimated into the finance cabinet, I'll do whatever I can to put in a good word for you,
Right.
for what you really want to do." And of course, I went to finance, and it was incredible. 2,000 employees, all state accounting, all state buildings, all technology, the backbone for everything. Over 7,000 buildings of property management. It just all of revenue. Revenue had been pulled in
Mhm.
under Governor Fletcher into the finance cabinet, and the Commonwealth of Technology had also been pulled in.